Beauty is a double-edged sword. As much as it has its apparent benefits, it also, like most things in life, has drawbacks. And today, I wanted to talk about the struggles of being beautiful. Now, this is something I've wanted to dissect for a long time now and wanted to kind of put out into the world so that other people can join in the conversation, but I wasn't really able to form my thoughts until today. People die to be beautiful, and you'd much rather be beautiful than not, which is why this topic is something quite difficult to talk about. It's really easy for it to sound very pompous and tone deaf, and admittedly, it has way more positives than negatives, as it is even research backed that, in general, more beautiful people are perceived to be smarter, kinder, more trustworthy, friendlier, and they are more prone to have opportunities than people that are not perceived to be beautiful. And another reason why it is quite difficult to make a video like this is because I've found it's not very relatable. And I do understand that this admission risks making me look like I'm pompous, but I genuinely only mean to foster an avenue for conversation on the topic. And if it ever comes off as otherwise, please know that is not my intention, and please feel free to step away, because more than wanting to foster conversation on a topic, I do not want to foster a hostile environment on my side of the channel. Beauty is also such a complex topic to discuss because it is intrinsically connected to a lot of different things. Although what I will be focusing on today is mostly on just surface level, physical conventions of beauty, rather than how colonialism or neo-colonialism affect people's perceptions of beauty, or even feminism. Though again, these are things that affect perceptions of beauty aside from culture and lived experience, religion, politics, historical events, current events. You get the point. Just to circle back and to emphasize just how rampant pretty privilege is, there are animals that are endangered or at risk that we are more willing to help because we perceive them to be cuter or, again, more beautiful than certain animals that we don't seem to care about because of their off-putting appearance. So I'm not minimizing pretty privilege. I just mean to draw attention to certain things that people might not know, or people might know and haven't had an opportunity to talk about until this video. So the first struggle of beauty is the fact that you become unapproachable. And this doesn't sound like such a bad thing. It is a very almost palpable feeling when you know that people will not approach you unless you approach them first. And you kind of learn to gauge the atmosphere of an environment in relation to how you affect it. Regardless of what you think you look like, you understand through experience. Through my experience, I've learned to understand that I affect the room that I enter, whether or not I mean to. This calls into mind an essay that I read in high school. Shout out to Miss Malyari, I love you. And the essay is entitled Under My Invisible Umbrella by Laurel Fantauzio. And this particular literature talks more about her proximity to whiteness and how it affects her, rather than beauty in a post-colonial country. And although you may say just because you have Western features, you are not inherently beautiful, which I agree, in my personal experience, it's kind of inextricably connected. Although I do think that this is something that I can talk about in an entirely separate video. Connecting this essay to my first point, which is being beautiful makes you unapproachable. I learned pretty quickly that if I wanted to make friends, I had to more often than not be the person to make the first move, which is not something that I find difficult to do. I've trained myself to do it, and it's something that I want to do. But it also calls into mind certain videos that I've seen where people say, if you are beautiful, or the more beautiful you are, the drier your DMs will be, or the less likely people will actually talk to you. And that is because they have a preconceived notion that you are someone that gets approached often, so why would they bother? Which then connects to my second point, which is that people will assume things that may or may not be true. And for some reason, the most biased thing, or I guess the second biased thing, which would be my intelligence. Now, this is a very odd territory because usually it's very polarized. People either assume that you're very smart or very dumb. And there's really no in between. I've had both. I've had someone in my college assume that I make Mozart-like music. I have a music degree simply based on how I looked, and I don't know where you would get that anywhere. Even if I looked like this, like I don't know. Would you assume that of me? I don't know. And I've had a coworker assume that I give really strict and rigid and comprehensive lesson plans to my students because of the way I look. And again, I don't know how you could possibly surmise that based on my appearance. Alternatively, I've also had people just assume I don't know how to do anything, or that I literally cannot comprehend what's happening before my eyes. Like, in high school, I recall I went to a doctor's appointment and I was prescribed to take a week of iron supplements to help my blood count. And then I was meant to go back to the clinic after that week to see if anything happened. But I was only able to go back to the clinic 2 weeks after. So the doctor laughed at me and said,
"You do know that's not how it works. Like, you can't do 1 week and then come back here an additional week later and expect there to be a difference."
And I just looked at him and I was like, I've been taking it for 2 weeks. I've been taking the supplement for 2 weeks. And then he was like,
Oh.
I've had 3 consistent experiences with male doctors that have laughed at my answers to their questions. I've never had that with a woman before. This then brings me to my third struggle, which is that you are harassed. For some reason, if you are more beautiful, people think it's okay for them to heckle at you and call you or point at you or talk about you loudly while you are passing by. And what's even worse is that they think you owe them your attention, and that you have to smile at them, and then you have to appease them because suddenly you are a performer because you are beautiful. Girl, I just want to get to work. I just want to go to the supermarket. Why are you bothering me? And another thing I wanted to point out is that people will stare at you. And this might not sound very malicious because it's just someone looking at you either up close or afar. It can be more malicious if it's up close and they're like getting into your personal bubble. I remember as a child, I would complain to my mother that people were staring at me and looking at me, and she was like, "Oh, it's all in your head, da 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 da." And then when I got older, I've gotten so good at like minimizing that type of attention to the point where I don't even notice it anymore. At some point when I was in my teens, it was so obvious that people were staring at me, and I had stopped complaining about it to my mother. She noticed that people were staring at me, and she was like, "Oh, why is that?" And then I looked at her and I was like, "People have been staring at me, Mom, and you said it was in my head." I felt so vindicated in that moment, yet at the same time, it wasn't really satisfying because after the fact, I still had to live through that without having anyone else understand what it feels like. And unfortunately, it's become my responsibility to understand how to navigate that. This is the part where I talk about how women are expected to uphold certain manners in public. And once we as women start acting out and defending ourselves in ways that are uncomfortable for men respond to it in hostility, saying that they mean no harm. But it's so obvious for a woman that has literally grown up to know the difference when someone is genuinely being kind and just wanting to get to know us, and someone that may actually have predatory intent within the guise of friendliness. The next struggle might seem obvious or even already tied to what I had just discussed. There is something more to how you are objectified as a beautiful person. Usually when people talk about objectification, it's usually towards a woman, and the woman is viewed as a sexual object rather than a person with agency and feelings and intellect. That is, in fact, a very obvious drawback to beauty. But when I say objectification in this sense, I mean you are treated like a literal object, like a kind of like an adornment or an embellishment to a conversation. I have experienced, oddly enough, multiple times wherein two people are talking about me to each other while I'm in front of them, and then they're only referencing me when they don't know the answer to the question about me. So person A and person B are talking about me, and they could be like, oh, what's her name? Oh, her name's Arwen. Where is she from? Oh, I don't know. Let me ask her. Where are you from? And then I somehow have to respond to that. So I reluctantly, hesitantly respond, oh, I live in this area. And they're like, oh, they live in this area. And then they continue it. And it's just a very creepy conversation, to be honest. Like, why can't you just talk about me to me? It's very odd. I don't know why anyone would ever want to do this, but it has happened to me more times than it really should have. And it's really odd because in those situations, if I act out or if I express my disapproval in being talked about in this manner, it's usually me that becomes the villain, that I'm being irrational. It's just a very bizarre experience. I feel like I would be in the right to express maybe even anger in a situation like that, but anger is not something that I like expressing. It puts me into a mentality that I do not enjoy, and I become a person I don't want to be. And so there's a lot of needing to kind of just not care about this and not care about anything that's happening, which brings me to my fifth point, which is that when you are beautiful, you can only be beautiful and nothing else. It kind of circles back into that objectification where you are a beautiful person, so do not react a certain way, especially not negative. And you have to always kind of be a sport about things because their attention is good. Even if you do not even want this attention, you have to suddenly be grateful for it. And beyond this, you as a beautiful person somehow always have to prove that you are more than your looks. And it took me a long time to really unlearn that. I think it's like a people pleaser part of me. They cannot seem to reconcile that you have personality, especially if it's a personality that doesn't mesh with the fantasy that they have immediately projected onto you based on nothing else but their visual reception of you as a person. Which brings me to my last point. To a certain degree, in certain environments, to certain people, you are othered. And in all its irony, it's like suddenly you as a beautiful person are a monster because you are othered. And suddenly people that have negative physical perception have more in common with people with positive physical perception than someone that is in between. And it's really ironic that there are archetypes in media and literature, in film, that beautiful people are evil. And somehow it's easier to vilify a person if they are conventionally attractive or beautiful. Now, before I end this video, I want to reference Cameron Russell, who I think coined the saying that beauty is like winning a genetic lottery. It does go without saying that I have been treated differently based on how I dress myself. I actually became really drawn to more alternative forms of beauty and just alt makeup and alt aesthetic in general because I so badly do not want to conform to the conventional ideologies of beauty, because a lot of it is formed under the pressure of a patriarchal society. I cannot reference any other experience other than that which I have experienced, and obviously I will be always biased to myself. I think it's just really ironic how we as a society strive to be beautiful and yet we punish beauty in its own ways. I think if there's anything to take away from this video is that there will always be struggles, and we as a society just have to be more empathetic. Not just to beautiful people, because as I've said, they have it better, but to everyone, and we shouldn't base our treatment of people on their outward appearance or on any appearance, rather their personality and how they treat other people and the world around them in general. And if you were wondering how many necklaces I have stacked on me, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Some of these are not even necklaces.